slightly overhyped. Look, the intro does point out that Marcus Aurelius arrived. He was the last of the 5 good emperors, according to Machiavelli's classification. And he was the end of the Pax Romana, which was 200 years of peace from 23 BC with the beginning of Augustus until Marcus's death in 180, probably of the Antonine Plague. I would love to crack a few jokes and, tell you why I love Marcus Aurelius. But I'm not sure that's what Marcus would recommend at this moment. I wish I could send you out to lunch on a high note. But Marcus said that if you decline to say what you think because of fear of the consequences, you have deserted your post as a man. So I'm going to give it to you straight, and I do so in a sense among friends, and I hope you will receive it in that spirit. I spoke to Matt Schlapp because I intend to say some difficult things about the United States, which I regard as a post-democratic state. But I do so without any sense of moral indignation as an Australian, because I think Australia is likewise a post-democratic state. And when you have a situation where an Australian Prime Minister is mobilising the Australian Army to stand on street corners to intimidate the Australian population, I say, well, that's not the behaviour of a democratic state. And when I see Victorian police shooting rubber bullets at Victorian citizens because they don't wish to inject an experimental chemical into their bodies, I say that is not a democracy. I first visited the United States as a 16-year-old, and I was a high school exchange student in a town called Anderson, Indiana. Hoosierville. There was a basketball hoop at the end of every driveway. And I had sat in a stadium for a high school basketball match in which there were 10,000 people in my town. And it was the Midwest writ large, vast, flat fields of corn, the headquarters of the Church of God. And frankly, I fell in love with the United States. I made a trip to Washington, D.C. I stood at dawn in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and I read the Gettysburg Address. And I fell in love with Abraham Lincoln. I read about the Founding Fathers, about George Washington, the president who could not lie. I read Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, the great minds, extraordinary minds assembled at one point in time who resisted a kind of tyranny on the basis of no taxation without representation. I studied the passenger manifest of the Mayflower, and I noted the highest levels of middle-class literacy of any cohort in human history because they all were determined to be able to read the Bible. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if I simply use my 5 senses, I cannot avoid the conclusion that the American dream is over. And it's over because Americans no longer believe it. Jane Jacobs, a classic Jewish genius, wrote The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And she studied the ingredients down to the level, a whole chapter on the footpath, or the sidewalk, as the Americans call it. Its role in the civic life of a city. And she made the observation that the single greatest asset a city possesses is the level of trust between unrelated citizens passing each other on the sidewalk. When I look at the United States today, I look at a country which is fatally divided, in which the citizens hate each other. I look at a country in which vast segments of the population have no confidence whatsoever in the integrity of an election. We wish to send international observers to elections in the Donbass. We need international observers to elections in Pennsylvania. Here we are. I look at Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. I don't wish to make a partisan point. Okay, all of us are going to go into senescence. Joe has obviously lost his marbles, as all of us will. He is in Shakespeare's 7th phase, a return to childhood. I don't mock or ridicule a man for getting old, but what I mock is the United States, because you're telling me Joe Biden is the best you have to offer to lead the Western world. Australians have got to ask, I have to ask myself as a 3-term member of the federal parliament, someone who secretly as a 16-year-old wished Australia could be the 51st state. I am now asking myself, at what point does Australia walk away from the American alliance? Joe Biden's first act as president was to spike a pipeline from Canada to the United States. Now, it appears to me, I don't know for a fact, I'm not making the accusation with confidence because I don't know the fact, but all I know is that Joe Biden told the world that if Russia didn't play ball, he would destroy the Nord Stream pipeline. And suddenly we find, after both the Royal Navy and the US Navy has been in the Baltic training Ukrainian Navy divers in how to identify mines on pipelines. I mean, we don't know if he was taking them off or putting them on. And it seems to me very likely that a group of intelligence and military operatives on our side regarded the best strategic decision they could think of in that moment to blow up a pipeline supplying gas to Europe, which is on its knees with lack of energy, and we look at a real possibility of young mothers freezing to death with their children in apartments in Berlin because they can't put gas in their heaters. And if you say to me, that's the best thought that the Western world has to offer, I want out. I find it an humiliation. Someone says we talk about China. Okay. We had exactly 1 year ago, Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade made a formal submission to a parliamentary inquiry. Marise Payne saying she's deeply concerned about foreign powers, wink, wink, China, using COVID as an excuse to extend authoritarian control over their populations. We have 1 year later, Dan Tehan from Victoria coming out saying, we have to admit the entire coalition party and backbench was asleep at the wheel during a massive and unjustified extension of state power, using COVID as a pretext to lock people in their homes, sack them from their job, tear up the Nuremberg Convention, force the injection of experimental chemicals into people's bodies, now including babies. Okay, and yet we wish to give China a lecture on authoritarian control. I say the Australian dream is over. When I turn up to this event, okay, a group of entirely civilised human beings from several countries and all over and we are surrounded by a vast army of police because it's a dangerous activity to express an opinion, where you will be sacked instantly from your job if you do not comply with an official dogma of climate change, racism, sexuality, on it goes. If you don't comply, you're out, you're shamed. We are a post-democratic state. And I just say to the United States, I'm just one citizen. I mean, I was a member of an Australian government, of the Howard government, for 3 terms. I was complicit in a number of these decisions. We in the Howard government signed up to the daft Kyoto Accords. I regard Scott Morrison as one of the worst prime ministers Australia has ever had. I have to tell you, with, no pride, as a 30-year member of the Liberal Party, I regard Gladys Berejiklian as one of the worst premiers New South Wales has ever had, and I am a lifelong Liberal. So, ladies and gentlemen, look, Marcus Aurelius was a straight shooter. Marcus Aurelius said, for example, he admired his adoptive father, Antonius Pius, because, for one reason, he said he kept few secrets. Few secrets. We have outsourced foreign policy of Australia, the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, who is, frankly, I think, probably the worst culprit. I mean, we're going to be in a situation, what I'm saying, I would recommend, as a former member of the Australian Parliament, we should withdraw from the US alliance. If Julian Assange dies in Belmarsh prison while Hunter Biden is wandering around snorting cocaine, I'm saying, I'm out, brothers. I'm out. This is not the rule of law. So, look, my time is up. The Pax Romana lasted for 200 years. That wasn't a record. The Minoans, discovered by Arthur Evans, the Minoans had about 1,000-year Pax Mediterranean, the Pax Minoa. When they discovered the first cities of Harappa in the Indus Valley, they thought they had discovered childcare centres because there were dice and there were balls and there were games, but there were no weapons. Eisenhower warned us of the danger to citizens of the military-industrial estate. I'm saying to you, we have completely outsourced foreign policy to intelligence agencies, and we've completely outsourced domestic policy to the World Economic Forum, Davos, and some other daft, idiotic bureaucracy in The Hague. And unless citizens can recover democracy, our story is over. And I just say we need to be honest about it. And the idea that as this sort of machine crumbles and falls, collapses, where you see, just streets after streets of the United States of people walking around like zombies in a drug-hazed overdose, where you can't open a Cartier store on Fifth Avenue, New York, because someone's going to smash it down and loot it. And we are meant to be the light on the hill, the beacon, providing leadership to the rest of the world. When the FBI, the CIA are conspiring together to spy on a Democratic candidate, lying to a court to get a visa, it's over. So my senses tell me the American dream is over. And I say we don't have the resources now even to worry about the American dream because Australia is getting sucked down the toilet just as fast. So if we do anything in this joint, we must give each other permission to be honest, to directly confront our real and serious problems. Augustus did manage, Rome had suffered 3 civil wars before Augustus arrived. And many people looking on at that would have said, well, the Roman story is over. Augustus did manage to turn it around. And, I regard our prospects as slim. But I'm here because I think there is still a snowball's chance of turning it around. And if we can, the only way we will do it is if citizens take back charge of their democracy. That's what, and so I reach across to the United States and say, someone who has loved you, who has wanted to be a part of you, I'm begging you, please turn this ship around. Thank you.